So the House and the Senate are back in session. The House will be considering the Defense Appropriations Bill, and the Senate's going to have the Commerce, State, and Justice Bill on the floor. As usual, we're following a number of committee meetings on both sides of the Capitol. On Wednesday, the House Financial Services is going to mark up pending legislation, and one of the bills that they'll be marking up is the Senior Safe Act, which is an adult financial protection bill that would give immunity to credit union employees and other financial institution employees if they raise examples of potential elder abuse in the financial services space. So we've been supportive of that, and we're very glad to see that going through the committee. Also on Wednesday, the Senate Special Committee on Aging is going to have a hearing on financial security, and we'll be sending a letter to that committee announcing our support for similar legislation in the Senate. On Thursday, the Senate Appropriations Committee's Subcommittee on Financial Services and General Government is going to mark up their appropriations bill. So it'll be interesting to see the funding levels that they have for the key programs we follow, like the Community Development Revolving Loan Program at NCUA and the Community Development Financial Institution Fund at Treasury. We'll look for those funding levels. We got good funding levels in the House, so hopefully we'll get just as good, if not better, in the Senate. We'll also be curious to see whether at this stage in the process the Senate is going to include any policy riders. Sometimes it happens at the subcommittee level. More often than not, it's further down the line, but we'll keep an eye on that legislation as it goes through the subcommittee. Also on Thursday, the National Credit Union Administration will have their board meeting, and they've got a number of items on their agenda, but what we're most interested in is the board briefing on interest rate risk supervision and whether they should add an S to the CAMEL ratings. So that will be another interesting insight on where the agency's thought process is on this particular issue. No decisions are expected at this meeting. It's just a board briefing, but it should be pretty interesting to see where they might be headed. Last week, NCUA Chairman Rick Metzger sent a letter to House Financial Services Committee Chairman Jeb Henserling regarding the agency's effort to improve the examination process for credit unions. This letter followed Chairman Henserling's remarks regarding his comprehensive regulatory reform bill, the effort to repeal Dodd-Frank and improve the regulatory environment for financial institutions. In Henserling's effort, he talks about the need to improve the examination process for credit unions. So what Chairman Metzger was saying to Chairman Henserling was, hey, we're already on the path to doing that, and we agree. The statements that we've seen from Chairman Metzger and from the folks at NCUA over the last several weeks indicate that they understand this is a top concern for credit unions and that they're working to address it. We saw them take a step initially to remove the calendar year examination requirement that gives them more flexibility in terms of the frequency of examinations for credit unions. Then they reached out to the system and asked us to help them with modernizing the call report and modernizing the exam process for credit unions. That was a very positive step, but what was really interesting about this letter from Chairman Metzger to Chairman Henserling is the timeline that Chairman Metzger suggested. We had expected a lot of these improvements to take place over a 2 to 4 year period, but Chairman Metzger suggested in the letter that some of them could be in place for the 2017 exam cycle, which really puts us, in our view, on a fast track. It's really too early to tell how significant this is going to be, but it's certainly a step in the right direction, and it could bring about some very meaningful relief for credit unions. By 2019, the world's going to look very different for credit unions. We're going to have the risk-based capital rule fully implemented. We'll see the modernized call reports, and the examination process should look different. It's possible that there'll be fewer examiners at credit unions for less time. They'll be doing more of it remotely. Those are the types of things that we think NCUA is trying to get to through this process. So the idea that they're willing to try to implement some of this sooner before this final, 2019 is a big year. That's very positive for credit unions. So as we look towards the coming weeks and months, there's a couple of things to keep in mind. Congress is going to be in session 2 more weeks, and then they'll take a week off for Independence Day. When they come back in July, if they come back in July, they're only going to be here for a couple of weeks before the political conventions. I say if because there are rumors going around Washington that they may not come back for the July session. The House has been having some difficulty getting appropriations bills through, and the thought process is if they're not going to be able to complete appropriations bills, there's not much use for them to be here in July. We'll see. Right now I still expect them to be here in July. Regardless, they're going to take 7 weeks off. They'll come back in September for about 4 weeks, and then they're headed home for the elections. So the window of opportunity of getting things through the process is rapidly closing. After the election, we'll see a lame duck period, and that's where I think you're going to see a lot of action, and it could include action on regulatory relief. So what we've been trying to do throughout this entire 2-year process is to move things along so that they're ripe for action at the end of the session. We're going to have to see how that strategy plays out, but right now that's the best type of legislative strategy. A couple of other things to keep in mind. We're hopeful that NCUA will finalize the field of membership proposal probably in September, maybe at their July meeting. We're encouraging them to do it as quickly as possible so that relief can come to credit unions. And then we're very interested in how NCUA implements the MBL rule. That some of the provisions have gone into effect already, but the bulk of the rule goes into effect at the end of the year. So the supervisory guidances that they're developing right now are very interesting to us in terms of what credit unions are going to have to do to comply with what we think is a very positive change in the regulatory apparatus there. So there's going to be a lot of time for lawmakers to be in their districts between now and the end of the year. And if there was one thing that I could have credit unions do to help support our advocacy while lawmakers are in their districts, it's to invite them to their credit union. This is a win-win. It's a win for the credit union because they get exposure to the member of Congress, they get to talk about the issues that are important to us, and they get to show the work that they're doing every day to help the members' constituents. And it's a win for the member of Congress because they're out in the community, they're learning, they're showing their face during what for almost all of them is an election year. So it's a win-win. It's very easy to do. You can do it by contacting the member's district office directly or working with your league or with CUNA to help set up those visits.